How's it going, PengPirates crew? It's Adrian and we're back with another video. So today is an amazingly special video I get to make for you guys. So for those of you that don't know, there's a Treasure Cup tournament on Saturday with Pro Play Games, and we actually squeaked by with just a top 8 finish. We got literally 8th, so we were able to dodge the bubble. We went 8-1 in the day, and I was feeling so good about all my matchups. So for today's video, I'm just gonna go in for like what my general thoughts were for the Treasure Cup, how my experience was in general, and then we're gonna go into a deck profile, as well as I'm gonna work through all the matchups that I had going on for the day, do a little recap. But before we get into the deck profile, which most of you are probably here for, I really wanted to give a shout outs to everyone that has been supporting me. Shout out to all my Bay Area folk, my anime imports guys, whiners, you guys are the best. The community there is just amazing. And then an ultra special shout out to the guys on the channel, Gabe, James. You've seen them, you've seen how much we've tested. Going into this tournament, I was feeling really uncomfortable because I was gonna play Doflamingo, but I actually left my cards at my parents' house, so I had to scrounge together a Whitebeard list, and you two really just helped me grind and play test with the webcam games. It was just amazing, and it really paid off in the end. But without further ado, let's get right into the deck profile. So jumping right into it, I played Newgate for this tournament. I specifically went hybrid Moby because I really liked this playstyle of Moby where you just take a bunch of life and you kind of just look at your hand and decide how you're gonna end the game. But what I found is the pure Moby builds, they run cards that are just really weak and kind of bad. Cards like Squard, Seaquake, you actually don't even need them in most of cases, if you have counters in hand. I feel with Moby, you're kind of playing defensive and offensive at the same time. You can't live that many turns on 0 life. And the reason for that is because you don't have a lot of 1k and 2k counters. All of the 1ks that you play, they are playable. And then you end up having Seaquakes, Vistas, and just Moby Dicks in hand that you don't need. So a lot of the time your hand just gets clogged up by these things that aren't counters, and you'll end up losing the game anyway if you're behind. So I didn't like playing like that, but I still did like playing Moby Dick, so I ended up going with the hybrid build. Shout out to Team PX3, and also especially the Worst Generation TCG with his Garrett Beard list. With Team PX3, I watched their video on it, and I linked the article, so I'll link that down below, and I'll also link down the deck profile and analysis for the Worst Generation. But this is where I got the inspiration for this list for sure. So then starting out with our 1 cost, I'm playing 4 Nami. Nami, of course, is just the main searcher for your Straw Hat counters. She's just an amazing card in general. A Nami in your hand can turn into a 2k counter. She could turn into a counter event, like Radical Beam or Guard Point. She could turn into Nico Robin on curve. So then usually if they have me go first, I'll actually just try to Straw Hat curve out. So then on turn 1, I'll try to play Nami, turn 2 play Robin, and then turn 3 play Luffy. And that just really helps you curve out and grab a really good board, setting you up for the late game. Yeah, but most importantly, she was just really good for grabbing the event cards. I pretty much exclusively, if I wasn't playing for Nico Robin, I would only just grab an event card, and then I would end the game with 3 or 4 event cards in hand, plus 3 or 4 2k counters, and it's just impossible for your opponent to deal with that while you have multiple things on the board. But yeah, not a lot to explain here. She's Nami. She is one of the best cards just in the deck in general. And then moving on to our 2 drops, I run 4 Brook as well as 4 Sanji. So these 2 are mainly just 2k counters, to be honest. I didn't really use them for anything else. You can use the Sanji if you don't really have a play, and then his main effect lets you add a life card to your hand, so it could potentially accelerate your Moby Dick turn if they're not swinging into you. But most of the time, your opponents are gonna want to swing into you, so this effect really didn't come up, and it's just too risky because it could get Vista'd, and then I lose a 2k. Brook never came up, and I don't think he would really ever come up, and I don't think he would ever come up in general, because you don't need to go wide on your board. You really just want to focus on landing your big cost cards so that you can end up swinging for game. You don't really need to concern yourself when Zoro has a chumpy board. So playing these things, it's just a little bit too risky. You'd rather just have 2k counter in hand. And then moving on to some of our 3 drops, I run 3 Nico Robin. So because I got this list off of the Worst Generation, he runs 2 Vistas, and I just didn't like that because the Vistas to me weren't getting any sort of value. The only time I really like playing Vista is into like Kinemon, so you could pop a Searcher. But other than that, like Nico Robin is just infinitely better into a lot of the more popular matchup. Again, she curves out your Dawn perfectly. And the thing about Vista is like, yes, you are removing something on the board. You don't necessarily need to have like a chumpy card out on the board. So for the most part, like if you don't draw Moby Dick, Vista's just sitting there, like, and it's just not a good swing. Nico Robin, you get the on KO effect by attaching one Dawn, and because of that, she could swing into multiple things on the board, you know, like she could swing into like Arrested Character and then KO another character on their board, or she could even pressure life early, right? Because most of the time, like if you're swinging 5k at like a Zoro, they might give you a 1k, but most of the time they'll just take it because, you know, like they don't want to give you cards in their hand. And then this card was super clutch against Law. I played against 2 Law players. I played one in my first round and then another one on my 9th round, so my last round for top 8. And these Nico Robins, like for different ways, were the reason why I won those games. In my first game, I was able to land one Nico Robin. He didn't have the jet pistol for it. So then I just, you know, swung him 5, he took, and then I popped something on his board. I think it was like a Nami. And then he had to spend his turn swinging at this. Like, he wants it off board for sure. So like he swung 6k at it. And then that's wasting a swing for him. So like I could potentially, you know, have less pressure on my life. And then the turn after, I just played another one. And at that point, it was just too much pressure for him to come back because, you know, he doesn't want to play like his Namis or like his Searchers because they're just going to get popped by Nico Robin. And swinging this at 5k is actually really annoying for Law to deal with because, you know, they're at 4 life. So they can't just take it casually. And then also if they don't want to, like, it's getting a 1k out of their hand. And Nico Robin was even crazier in my last game because I went second and then I ended up searching with 2 Namis. He bricked so hard, like his turn 1 was literally just a beige pass. And then on my turn 2, I played 2 Namis. I think searched 1 Nico Robin and 1 guard point. And then on his turn 2, he's like, okay, well, I think you're playing Strawbeard. So he swings 8k into me, not knowing that I'm playing, you know, Moby actually. So then I end up just taking that life. He wastes a whole turn just swinging at me. And then I played out this Nico Robin. And then on his crackback turn on 5 Dawn, he just uses 4 of it to jet pistol it. So at this point, he's wasted 2 whole turns against me. And then now I'm on 6 Dawn. I play Moby and Atmos. And it's like, what do you do at that point? Like you're already so behind as Law. So like this Nico Robin just puts so much pressure on, you know, Zoro, on Law, on Luffy. It's just such an amazing card. And honestly, if it's eating a jet pistol, you don't mind because that means like you're less likely to, you know, have an Atmos be KO'd or a King Duke, which are the cards that matter because they get the Moby Dick boost. You know, none of the Straw Hats get the Moby Dick boost. So it's going to be really important for that. And then rounding out our 3 costs, I just run 2 promo Luffy. Again, just a 2k. I think this is the most playable one out of all my 2k counters. If I didn't have like a jank, if I didn't have to put this like jank list together, like I don't know if you guys noticed, like these are common Sanjis that I got from like AX, but I would definitely run this card at 4 if I had more of him because he's just super playable, right? Because these other 2 cards, like you don't really want to go wide, but Luffy himself, he could go up to 7k because if you have 2 Dawn under him, he gets plus 2000 power. So he goes up to 5k by having 2 Dawn under him plus the 2k. So you're swinging for 7k. So it's actually pretty significant. I ended up playing him once throughout the whole tournament and he got Vista'd, but you know, it halted his turn because he had to Vista this thing. So he was still pretty good all in all. And yeah, he's like just the most playable 2k. All right, so moving on to more of our Whitebeard stuff, starting off with our 4 costs. We have 4 cost Marco. So this card is absolutely insane. One of the best defensive cards in this format. He's a blocker that has the effect of on KO. If you have 2 or less life, you can trash 1 Whitebeard Pirates card to bring him back. And he is absolutely amazing because he prevents your opponent from being able to like swing big at you, because now they have to think about, oh, is he gonna block with this Marco if I waste like a ton of Dawn to swing like 9 or 10? You could end up just pitching 1 card for it. Against Zoro and like Luffy, I usually don't block with him until I know for a fact it's gonna be the last swing. I see a lot of players like they'll block pretty early with this card because they're not willing to give like 1 or 2 cards like with a guard point or like a rad beam. And I think that's a pretty huge mistake sometimes, especially if, you know, they have a wide board that they can swing at and you need this Marco to stay up. You know, of course, if you're always planning to get rid of the Marco, it's fine. You just don't leave its ability up. But like, a Zoro player being able to swing 5 5k into this Marco and get like a ton of cards out of your hand is not something that you want. So yeah, most of the time I'm just like blocking the last attack in the turn with this Marco and just saving as many cards as I can. And also the more busted thing about his like revive effect is that you know, he turns into a 7k attacker with Moby Dick on field, so he's actually a part of like a lot of lethals, and like making sure he's alive for that last turn is super important. All right, moving on to our other 4 costs, we got Atmos. Atmos is an absolutely insane card. He is just a 4-drop 6k vanilla, but you could play him on turn 2, and your ideal curve for this is like you go second and you play Moby Dick into Atmos, or you could play your Straw Hat line, whatever you draw into and feel confident in. But mostly I'm going second, and I'm trying to go for this Atmos play. He turns into an 8k swing with Moby Dick. There's not a lot to say about it. You know, you attach 1 Dawn onto him, he's swinging 9k now for magic numbers. He's just an all-around great card. And then the final one of our 4 costs, we got Jozu. Jozu's really great because he's a 2k counter, so you know, I end up running like 13 2k counters in this deck, which is a lot. And then also he has the added effect of when he has a Dawn under him, he actually gains Rush. So what this means is if you have Moby Dick on field, he turns into a 7k swing for 5 Dawn, which is super efficient. It's really good, and it's gonna help you close out a lot of games if you have Jozu in hand. I don't think I ended up ever summoning Jozu. I usually just had enough characters on board to like fully close out the game. But yeah, he definitely comes up when I was testing like on the sim and everything. And then moving on to our 5 costs, I got 3 Kingdu. Kingdu's in the same boat as Atmos. It's just like, not same boat. But yeah, Kingdu is the same as Atmos. He's just a 5 cost vanilla that is at 7k. You know, with Moby Dick, he's turning into a 9k swing for free. This card is great to play after they've played something like a Jet Pistol, because the likelihood of them having like a Jet Pistol after they've Jet Pistoled your Atmos, they have to commit like an Otama or a Gordon to this to remove it. But overall, this card is just amazing, and it's usually not getting swung at because it's 7k. They would usually swing at like your Atmos if you have it on board, or your leader, so he usually just sticks onto the board when he's played. And then competing for our other 5 cost spot, I have Luffy. These 2 cards are great on curve. I play them in different scenarios. Like if I need tempo on the board, I will play the Luffy, but then a lot of the times I will opt to play Kingdu instead, especially if I'm really close to Moby range, because having this be a 9k swing every turn just puts your opponent on a clock. Also, Luffy is just great because, especially against like Law and Kinemon, because you could really drain out their hand and they'll think they'll be safe for a blocker, and then you just punch them unblockable, you know, for 8k. That's what I did in my last game against Law. You know, I was like whittling down his hand. He was on 0 life and he still had a Law blocker up, but he had 1 card in hand, so I just swung 8k into his leader. There's no way he could counter out of that because of the unblockable. So he gave me that lethal in the end, which is really good. And then honestly, the MVP of the deck, we have 7 cost Ace. This card is crazy. So on play, he's going to give 2 things minus 3,000 power, and then he gains Rush. And this is crazy because it gives you so much tempo on the board. A lot of the time, I'm really behind in board state up until I play this Ace, because he's giving you minus 3,000 to 2 characters, which means, you know, 5Ks could get swung into Nami. If you have things like Atmos, you're usually just clearing the board, especially if you have Moby up. And there was a turn where like I got my Atmos and my Kingdu removed in, you know, 1 turn against Zoro, and I was super behind on board. He full swung me with like 4 characters. But I did have these like 2 Namis down. I play down the Ace and I just completely clear his board, and I'm still able to poke him for 9k. In one of my matches against Luffy, against my boy Alan, he was really pivotal because I wanted to clear his board so badly, and I ended up double acing him, which is something they just can't deal with. And he's really great if you go second, because on 8 Dawn, you could play him pretty safely. Because if you have a lot of 2Ks in hand and a guard point or like a radical beam, I would always just like on 8, just calculate how much Dawn like they could potentially swing with. And if they can't kill me within the turn, then I'm going to play this Ace. And then if you have a second one in hand, he's even better on 10, because you already have like the first one and whatever's on board. I think there was like a board state at one point where I literally had like an Atmos, a Kingdu, an Ace, and then I played this Ace on top of that, cleared their board, and then all of a sudden they just have like a 6k, 7k, 7k, 7k. I have 3 event cards active or 3 Dawn standing because I'm on 10 Dawn. And it's like, what do you do at that point? Like, you want to kill me because if you don't, you're going to be facing like an 8k and like 2 9ks. But you can't really kill me because I have 3 counter events in hand that, you know, like they're both Radical Beams and like guard points and stuff because I searched them with Nami or I drew into them. So it's really crazy board states that you could create with Ace. The only reason why I'm running this card at 3 is because I don't own a 4th Ace. But if I did own a 4th Ace, I would 100% run him at 4. He's super pivotal for this deck, and I think he is like the linchpin of your deck. Like, drawing into this card is super important. And then of course we run 3 of the 9-cost Newgate. Newgate is just absolutely insane because you could play him on 0 life against Zoro, and if they have a board full of just like chumpy attackers, there's no way they kill you. This is a card that I might cut down to 2 in favor of like a 4th Ace because he didn't come up too much, but when he comes up, it's really, really good. Because if you're able to play him on turn 5 with like 1 life standing, like it's just an amazing play to do. But he does come up, sometimes. And he ended up like winning me like a really crazy game because I was able to swing 14k. And then moving on to our counter events, I run 4 Radical Beam and 3 Guard Point. I like this ratio a lot. I don't think I would change it. I was originally running 2 Guard Point when I submitted my deck, and then I did like a resubmission because I really love having these in hand, and I think these ratios are absolutely perfect. I feel like, you know, I end games with like either 3 or 4 of these like in a different combination in my hand, and it really puts your opponent in like a checkmate scenario where you just have like a full board that is, you know, being powered up by Moby Dick. You have these 3 counter events in hand, and the deck is so consistent because like the likelihood of you not hitting these counter events is like super low since you're taking, you know, your whole life, you're drawing cards, and then you have the Nami to search them out. So these cards are absolutely crazy. Like, I always had at least 3 in hand. And it just helps you win those games. You know, with Radical Beam, you're able to go up to 10,000 when you're on 2 life. Guard Point lets you go up to 9k. And Guard Point's really good because people want to swing you for like magic numbers, which is, you know, 8,000 at your leader. And, you know, you could counter out of that with just 1 card, which is amazing. And then, of course, the star of the show, we got 3 Moby Dick. I liked this card at 3. I don't think I ever didn't see it. There might have been a situation where I didn't see it on curve, but mainly I'm mulliganing for it, so the likelihood of me like finding it is pretty high, especially, you know, since you have like all your 6 life cards and everything. And this card was just great. It gave me all of the lethals that I needed. You could still win with this deck without the Moby Dick, but the Moby Dick is like, again, like the checkmate thing on the board where it's like your opponent has to kill you on that turn, or else they're just eating like so many 9Ks, like an 11Ks. Even if they're like boosted by Whitebeard, they're still probably gonna lose because you have this Moby Dick, and it's just absolutely insane. There's no question why this card is being banned in OP3. But yeah, this was the list that I'm running. If I were to make some changes, I would definitely play like 4 of this promo Luffy, maybe cut like 2 Brook. I was also thinking about possibly cutting down King Dude to 2 because I usually did not play him that often. He's too expensive sometimes to play. But he was really good, so I don't know. I don't really know on that ratio. I think the event ratios are absolutely perfect. I love 3 Moby Dick. Could consider running 4. And then for Luffy, I would maybe cut him down to 2 in favor for like another Ace or like another Moby Dick, because he's really good for applying pressure early and like, you know, faking your opponent out. I'm like Strawbeard, but other than that, like sometimes I'd have multiple of him in hand and it would just feel awful. But yeah, so that's the deck profile, but let's get into the matchups for the day. All right, so I wanted to use this time in the video to just talk about my matchups and my overall like thought process throughout the tournament. I'm gonna put my matchups like right here somewhere. But round 1, I went up against the Law, and as I mentioned before, I was able to land 2 Nico Robins, so that game was pretty easy to win. Not having Jet Pistol and just getting your Namis popped, it's not a fun time, but he was really cool. Shout out to Daquan. He was a really cool guy. I had a really awesome conversation with him just about One Piece in general. We were just having a huge discussion after. It was awesome. And then round 2, I played against Zoro. This one was a huge wake-up call for me. This is where I started to realize that the webcam and online tournaments, they bring about them like a different kind of vibe. I'm used to playing in person, and, you know, even in the bigger tournaments, like for Pokemon and everything like that, I'm really comfortable playing in person. But this is my first time playing like an online event, and just being in my own house and, you know, like having to look at the webcam, there's something about it where like I was just making these weird misplays and these like weird mishaps that were going on that I would never do in real life. I don't know if that resonates with you guys, but it was definitely happening to me because round 2, I was on 8 Dawn, 0 life, and my play was to, you know, swing in with ace and then leave 1 up for radical beam. I had a bunch of 2Ks in hand, so if he wasted his turn full swinging, he was gonna lose the next turn anyway. But what I ended up doing was I attached 1 onto a Robin, and then I realized, oh my god, like I rested 7 to play ace. I'm at 0 life with 0 Dawn standing, and I only had enough, without the radical beam, I only had enough counter. I think I had like 3 2Ks, so I could only go up to 12. If he just full stack swung me right there, I would have just lost the game. But luckily my opponent, you know, he didn't see it. He started trying to swing into my board. I let out like such a big sigh of relief because I definitely should have lost that game in round 2. And then round 3, I had a pretty crazy game against Zoro. It was probably my closest Zoro game. He was just dealing with my board. Like I played an Atmos and it got, you know, Gordon Vista'd. He was even able to swing with the Gordon before. He boosted it up with like a Machino. And then I think I got, you know, my King Do like pistoled or something like that. I was just getting everything on my board removed, and he was taking all of the life I was swinging him for, so he had a ton of cards in hand. But I ended up squeaking by with the win because I did have like double Nami and ace, so then I was able to fully clear his board the turn before he Whitebearded. So with the board state that I had, I think I had like a Marco, an ace, and my leader on board. He was at 7k with like 11 cards in hand. It was a lot. I don't remember exactly what I had on board. I think it was something like an Atmos, a Marco, and an ace. So I ended up swinging him 7k with Marco, and then I swung him 2 9ks with my leader and Atmos, and he countered out of all of it. And then I swung 11k with my ace, which he took, and he had like, I think like 6 cards in his hand at this point. And then I saved the rest of my 6 Dawn up, and then I swung him for 14, which was perfect lethal. It was perfect math. He only ended up having 9k in counter, going right up to 14. He like totally bricked on life, so I was really lucky to squeak by with that win there. And then in my 4th round, oh my god, this was abysmal, guys. I played against Dofi, and I was in control of the game for the entire time. I was able to just control his board, where I had 2 Namis out on board, and I ended up playing ace on 2 of his things, and then I was able to like almost clear his entire board. He had to use a lot of blockers, and I was in full control of the game. And then one of my turns, I'm on 9 Dawn, and I think, and I don't know what was going on in my head, but I passed the turn before I play a Marco on board, and I already said pass, and he was already going with his turn. I didn't want to be that guy to be like, oh, can I take back that play? I forgot to play something. So again, it's just like something about these webcam games and being at home, like I'm not fully, you know, up here in the head. So I end up leaving 9 Dawn standing, and then he goes, oh, 9 Dawn standing, that's crazy. And then he's like so scared. And then I'm so glad he couldn't see my face. I was just like, oh, yep, 9 Dawn, got a lot of counter. And what's the crazy part is I should have still won that game. But on the last turn, you know, I played the Marco out, and he was swinging me 6Ks. He had a Mihawk out, and for some reason I was so fixated on him like full stacking with a Mihawk that I don't even know why I blocked. I blocked really early with a Marco, thinking that, you know, he might have something like an Arabesque Fist, and then he was trying to fake me out. But then I was like, I'm so stupid. If he had something like Arabesque Brick Fist, you know, he would have just played it at the start, swung at me. So yeah, that was just a complete L on my part. My mental took a huge dip after that, but I was able to focus up in the rest of my rounds, and I didn't drop a single game after that. So after those Dofi games, I played 2 more Zoro games, and I beat them pretty handily. There was like at no point in the game where I really felt in danger. I feel like this deck has an amazingly disgusting Zoro matchup because I just sit back and I just take all of the 6k attacks, and then I just build a board that they can't deal with, and I end up having like a bunch of 2Ks and, you know, counter events in hand. It just felt like there was nothing they can do. So at this point, I'm 5-1, and, you know, I really want to go 8-1, and then I have to face my boy Alan. For those of you that don't know, Alan is an awesome guy from my locals. He's a good friend and a great player. I've actually never beat him at tournament in locals, so I was really, really nervous coming into it because he's a top 4 regionals player. He topped twice with Luffy, which is what he was playing for the tournament. So I was just super nervous going in, but we were able to squeak out with the win, which is crazy because he still bricked. Like, he bricked really hard. He didn't really play anything until turn 3, but he was able to land the Whitebeard, and I didn't have a Marco to set up with a block, so he could potentially just swing me for like, you know, 20k. But luckily, I had just enough event counters in hand. I had exactly 22k in counter between 2 rad beams and just like a bunch of 2ks. So I end up squeaking out with a win. He full stacks, swings 20 with Whitebeard, and I counter out of it. I'm able to end up winning that game. That was like a double ace game where it was, again, like it's just like a bunch of 2ks, a bunch of events in hand. There's 2 aces on the board. It's like, what do you do? And then at this point, I'm like, okay, I can't let his sacrifice go in vain. I have to win the rest of it. So I play against another Luffy in round 8. And I think this one was pretty good for me too. Like I never really felt like I was in any danger of dying. I think with this deck, it's really easy to get math wins because like your curve is so set. And if you're just following your curve and, you know, you're keeping track of what can they swing with, you know, how much can they potentially swing with on me during this turn, it's really easy to just look at your hand and be like, okay, they could swing up to like 15k with all of their Dawn. So then I'm just like looking at my hand most of the time. I'm like, okay, what should I counter out with on this turn? Next turn, what is my play? It's just, I feel like this game, like with this version of Whitebeard, you have to be thinking ahead a lot, because there were a lot of moments where I could have definitely like given up a guard point instead of like giving up a Marco, but then like I was thinking about like the upcoming turns and everything, and it's just like I need these cards in hand, I need these guard points if I'm gonna win this game. So there's just a lot of pivotal moments. I think if you want to play this deck in the future, like you really just need to get with the math. And then at that point, I'm 7-1, you know, I'm feeling great because I got a chopper guaranteed, and I'm like, wait, I can potentially go top 8. So for my 9th round, I go against Law, and he just completely bricked. I felt so bad. And again, it's the crazy Robin plays. So his turn 1 was just a Beige. He passes it over to me, and my turn 1 is double Nami. I ended up searching a Nico Robin and I think a guard point with both my Namis. And then I don't quite remember his turn 2 play, but it wasn't that impactful. I think it was like a swing 6 or something like that. And then of course, you know, on my turn 3, I played the Nico Robin, swung him 6k, and then on the crackback, all he could really do was, you know, jet pistol the Nico Robin. So I basically made him waste a turn because I have Robin on board. And at that point, you just can't win, because now I'm transitioning into like, you know, a late game. I have Moby Dick on board, able to play Moby Dick and Atmos on 6 Dawn. So it was just super hard for my opponent to deal with it. You know, he had to dry play a Law. His hand was absolutely abysmal. So I ended up just squeaking out with a win. I think that match lasted like 10 minutes. It was my quickest match. And honestly, I wish it went a little longer, because the whole entire time I was just sitting at my desk like, oh my God, am I gonna get this Luffy? Am I gonna bubble out? And then, you know, like an hour later, they gave me the results, and I squeaked by with just top 8, with 8th place with this deck. So I felt so good about it. So yeah, that's how my first Treasure Cup went. I'm gonna be making a video when we get that prizing. It's gonna be awesome. And yeah, so I got the Serial Luffy, all the championship cards, and I'm just like so excited. And part of me wishes it was a regional, because believe me, I love the prizing. Don't get me wrong. I love Serial Luffy. I love getting these cards that are worth thousands. But what I really want is like, I'm definitely a competitor at heart, where like I just want to compete. So in my head, I'm like, if I'm gonna top for like one tournament, I would rather it be a regional so I could get that Nat invite. But hopefully in July, I could top in the online regional to get that Nat invite that I really want. But other than that, it was an amazing first tournament for me, and I still got 2 more up and coming, so maybe, I don't know, multiple tops. That'd be kind of awesome. But yeah, let me know how you guys are feeling at the Treasure Cups. For anyone who played, how did you do? How did you feel about it? What was your experience like? And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. And then one more shout out to everyone that was supporting me. You know, everyone in the Milk Bar, you guys know who you are. You guys are awesome for cheering me on. And hopefully we could do it again. I'll see you on